The sky over New Delhi was blue and clear. It was a normal Tuesday morning. Millions of people walked to work. Cars filled the streets. Children ran to school with bags on their backs. Nobody looked up. Nobody had a reason to. Then, at 9:14 a.m., the sky changed. A dark line appeared far above the clouds. At first, people thought it was a storm, but storms do not move like this. The line grew wider and darker and closer. Within seconds, it blocked out the sun. Dr. Aryan Malhotra was standing in his lab at the Indian Space Research Center. He was 34 years old, tired from a long night of work, and holding a cup of coffee that was already cold. He looked out the window because his colleague, Priya, had shouted his name. "Aryan, look!" He turned, and what he saw made his coffee cup fall from his hand and shatter on the floor. Massive ships were descending from the sky. They were not like anything from the movies. They were black, sharp, and silent. No engines roared, no fire trailed behind them. They moved like knives falling from the sky, cutting through the clouds without a sound. What is that?" Priya whispered. Aryan did not answer. He could not. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were showing him. Within 2 minutes, the ships stopped moving. They hung in the air above the city, motionless like dark clouds that refused to rain. Then, without warning, without a message, without a single word, they opened fire. Beams of white light shot down from the ships. They were silent, but their effect was not. Buildings collapsed instantly, as if they were made of paper. Cars exploded. The ground shook so hard that windows shattered across the entire city. Aryan grabbed Priya's arm and pulled her under a desk as the building trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere outside, people were screaming, but even the screaming did not last long. The beams did not stop. They swept across street after street, block after block, erasing everything in their path. In less than 10 minutes, an entire section of New Delhi, a city that took centuries to build, was gone. And it was not just Delhi. At the exact same moment, the same dark ships appeared over Tokyo, over New York, over Cairo, London, Lagos, São Paulo, and Sydney. Every major city on Earth, in every time zone, in every corner of the world, saw the same nightmare unfold in the same few minutes. There was no warning. There was no demand. There was no message asking humanity to surrender. There was only fire, falling from a silent sky. By the time the attack ended, just 23 minutes after it began, the ships rose back into the clouds and vanished as quickly as they had come. No explanation, no farewell. They simply left, the way someone might step on an insect and walk away without a second thought. When the dust settled, the world tried to count what it had lost. The number, when governments finally agreed on it 3 days later, was almost impossible to say out loud. 10 million people. Dead. In under half an hour. Aryan Malhotra survived. Priya survived too, though she had a broken arm and a cut across her forehead that would leave a scar for the rest of her life. They crawled out from under the shaking building 2 hours after the attack ended, coughing from dust and smoke into a city that no longer looked like the one they knew that morning. Ambulances screamed in every direction. Soldiers moved through the streets, some helping the wounded, some simply standing still, staring at the sky, waiting for the ships to return. Aryan walked through the ruins in silence. He passed a school that had been reduced to broken concrete. He passed a market where fruit still sat on stalls, untouched, while the people who sold them were gone. He saw a child's shoe lying alone in the middle of the road, and something inside him broke quietly without a sound. The way the city itself had broken, he did not cry. Not yet. There would be time for that later. Right now, his scientist's mind was already asking a question that would define the rest of his life. Why? Why attack without demands? Why leave without taking anything, without saying anything? An enemy that wants land takes land. An enemy that wants resources takes resources. But these ships took nothing. They killed, and then they left. It made no sense, and that was the most frightening part of all. 3 days after the attack, the world's leaders gathered, not in person but through secure video links because travel between countries, was now considered too dangerous. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists from every major nation joined the same call for the first time in human history. For decades, countries had fought each other. Wars over land, oil, religion, and pride had divided the planet for as long as anyone could remember. But on that day, for the first time, humanity understood something new. They were not just nations anymore. They were one species, and something out there did not care about their borders, their flags, or their history. Something out there saw humanity the way humans might see an anthill, worth stepping on, but not worth talking to. General Marcus Webb, a senior commander from the United States military, spoke first on the call. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. "We have analyzed the attack patterns from every affected city," he said. The ships targeted population centers directly, government buildings, military bases, research centers, and mostly untouched. This wasn't about weakening our defenses. "Then what was it about?" asked the Prime Minister of Japan, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Webb paused. "We believe it was a message." The room, or rather, the dozens of video screens connected across the world, went silent. "A message?" someone repeated. "They killed 10 million people to send a message?" "Not a message with words," Webb clarified. "A message of power. They wanted us to know exactly what they are capable of, without saying a single word." In a lab beneath the ruins of New Delhi, Aryan Malhotra was not thinking about messages of power. He was thinking about wreckage. Government teams had been combing through the destroyed sections of the city, searching for survivors, for bodies, for anything that could explain what had happened. Aryan, as one of the country's top scientists, had been given access to a restricted site, a place where something unusual had been found. Fragments of the alien ships. Most of the alien technology had disintegrated after the attack, as if the ships were designed to leave nothing behind. But in one location, buried beneath a collapsed building, a research team found a piece of metal unlike anything on Earth. It was black, smooth, and impossibly light. It did not react to fire, acid, or extreme pressure. And most strangely of all, it was warm to the touch, as if it were still alive. Aryan stood in front of the fragment, wearing thick protective gloves, his heart pounding. "Run the analysis again," he told his assistant. "There has to be something we're missing." His assistant, a young engineer named Kabir, shook his head. "Sir, we've run it 6 times. The material doesn't match anything in our database. It's not metal. It's not alloy. It's something else." Aryan leaned closer to the fragment. And that was when he noticed something the others had missed. Faint markings, almost invisible, ran along the surface of the metal. Not scratches. Not damage. Symbols. "Kabir," Aryan said slowly, "get me a light. A strong one." Under the bright beam of a flashlight, the symbols became clearer. They were arranged in patterns. Precise, deliberate, intelligent. This was not decoration. This was writing. Aryan's hands trembled slightly as he photographed the markings and sent them to every research team across the globe within the hour. For the first time since the attack, humanity had found something that the aliens had left behind on purpose. It took 11 days for the world's linguists, mathematicians, and AI systems to translate even a fragment of the message. It was not written in any human language, of course, but it followed patterns that mathematics could understand, patterns based on numbers, sequences, and logic that transcended language itself. When the translation was finally complete, it was sent directly to the Emergency Council of World Leaders. Aryan was invited to the call, sitting nervously beside generals and presidents far more powerful than himself. The translated message appeared on every screen. It was short, and it was clear. "You have been measured. You are not yet worthy of contact. Prepare or perish. We return when your world remembers what it destroyed." Nobody spoke for a long moment. "What does that mean?" asked the president of Brazil. "What your world destroyed. Destroyed what?" Arian leaned forward slightly, his mind racing. It could mean anything. Our environment, our history, some past event we don't even remember. Or, General Webb said quietly, it could mean they're watching us, studying us, and they've already decided we failed some kind of test. Failed a test that kills 10 million people? The Prime Minister of Japan snapped. What kind of test is that? Nobody had an answer. But one part of the message stood out to everyone in that call, repeated in the minds of every leader long after the video call ended. We return. They were coming back. News of the message spread quickly, though governments tried at first to control the panic. It was impossible. Within days, the phrase "we return" was known across the entire planet. Fear spread faster than any army ever could. Some people prayed, some people rioted, some people simply stopped going to work, stopped sending their children to school, convinced that nothing mattered anymore if the sky itself could open and end their lives without warning. But something else happened too, something that surprised even the scientists who had spent their lives studying human behavior. People began to unite. Not perfectly, not everywhere. Old conflicts did not disappear overnight, but for the first time in recorded history, nations that had fought wars against each other for generations began sharing military intelligence. Scientists who had once competed for funding and fame began working side by side, sharing research day and night. Soldiers from rival countries trained together, preparing for an enemy that did not care which flag they carried. Humanity, faced with an enemy greater than itself, began, slowly, painfully, to become one. Aryan Malhotra became a central figure in this new alliance. His discovery of the alien fragment and the message hidden within it made him one of the most important scientists on the planet, almost overnight. He was given access to research facilities beyond anything he had imagined. Technology, resources, and information gathered from governments that, until recently, would never have shared such secrets with each other. He barely slept. He barely ate. Every hour felt like it mattered, because somewhere above the clouds a countdown had already begun, and nobody knew how much time was left on it. 3 weeks after the attack, Arian stood in a newly built research facility outside New Delhi, staring at a wall covered in data, patterns from the alien fragment, satellite footage of the attack, casualty reports, and theories written by the greatest minds on the planet. Kabir walked in, holding a tablet, his face pale. "Sir," he said, "you need to see this." Arian turned. "What is it?" "New satellite data. From orbit." Kabir's hands were shaking slightly as he held out the tablet. "Something's out there, past the moon. It wasn't there yesterday." Arian took the tablet and looked at the image. A shape, faint but massive, sat motionless in the darkness of space, far beyond the moon's orbit. It had not been there a day earlier. Now it simply existed, silent and still, watching. "Is it them?" Arian asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. Kabir nodded. "The size alone, sir, it's bigger than anything we've ever built. Bigger than anything we thought possible to build." Arian stared at the image for a long moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The message had been clear. We return when your world remembers what it destroyed. Humanity had less than a month to prepare, less than a month to understand what they had lost, what they had done wrong, and how to survive an enemy capable of erasing 10 million lives without even blinking. Arian set the tablet down slowly. "Call the council," he said. "Tell them it's begun." Outside the research facility, the sky was calm and blue, the same as it had been on the morning the ships first appeared. But now, everyone on Earth understood the truth. The silence would not last. Somewhere beyond the moon, something ancient and powerful was watching humanity, waiting, measuring, deciding whether the species below deserved to survive what was coming next. And deep down, in the quiet fear that gripped every person on the planet, one question echoed louder than any other. What happens when they return? The object beyond the moon did not move for 6 days. It simply sat there, silent and massive, like a dark eye watching the Earth from a distance. Satellites tracked it every second. Military ships from every nation stayed far away, afraid that getting too close might trigger another attack. Nobody dared to test it. Aryan Malhotra barely left his lab during those 6 days. He slept on a cot in the corner of the research facility, waking every few hours to check new data. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his mind refused to rest. Somewhere in the numbers, in the patterns, in the strange black fragment sitting in a sealed container across the room, there had to be an answer. On the 7th day, the object beyond the moon finally moved. It did not come closer. It simply turned, slowly, like a giant eye shifting its gaze. Then it went still again. "It's watching us," Kabir said, standing beside Aryan as they studied the satellite feed. "It's not attacking, it's just watching." "Then we still have time," Aryan said quietly. "We need to use it." 2 days later, Aryan was called to the capital for the most important meeting of his life. The Global Defense Council had been formed in the weeks after the attack, a group made up of military leaders, scientists, and government officials from every major nation on Earth. It was the first true global government humanity had ever created, born not out of agreement but out of fear and necessity. The meeting room was massive, built in secret beneath the city, deep enough to survive another attack from the sky. Screens covered every wall, showing feeds from research centers around the world. Aryan sat near the back, feeling small among generals with decades of experience and presidents who commanded nations of hundreds of millions of people. General Marcus Webb stood at the front of the room, addressing the group. "We have 6 weeks," he said, "maybe less. Based on the pattern of the ship's movement and the message left behind, our top scientists believe the enemy will return in that time frame to finish what they started, or to test us again." 6 weeks, repeated the president of France, disbelief clear in his voice. "You want us to prepare for an enemy that erased 10 million lives in 23 minutes in 6 weeks? We don't have a choice," Webb replied firmly. "We use the time we have, or we don't survive what comes next." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, leaders began to speak, offering resources, technology, and knowledge that their nations had guarded for decades. Weapons programs once kept secret from rival nations were now shared freely. Advanced materials research from one country was combined with quantum computing breakthroughs from another. Walls that had existed between nations for generations came down in a matter of hours. Aryan watched amazed as humanity's greatest secrets became humanity's greatest weapon, not against each other, but against something far greater than any nation had ever faced. When it was his turn to speak, Aryan stood, his hands trembling slightly. "The fragment we recovered," he began, "is unlike anything we've seen. It doesn't just resist damage, it seems to repair itself. If we can understand how, we could use this to build our own defenses, shields, maybe even weapons." "How long would that take?" asked the Prime Minister of Japan. Aryan hesitated. "With the resources being shared today, maybe 4 weeks. It's not much time, but it's a start." Webb nodded firmly. "Then that's your priority, Dr. Malhotra. Understand that fragment, understand what we're facing, everything else depends on it." For the next month, Aryan led a team of scientists from 12 different countries working together in a way that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. Physicists from Germany worked beside engineers from South Korea. Chemists from Nigeria collaborated with material scientists from Canada. Language barriers were crossed with translation software and simple determination. Everyone in that lab understood the same truth. There was no time for old rivalries anymore. Slowly, painfully, they began to understand the alien fragment. It was not simply metal. It was something closer to a living material, cells arranged in a pattern that could repair damage, absorb energy, and adapt to new conditions. It was, in simple terms, technology that behaved like biology. "If we can recreate even a small piece of this," Aryan told the team one evening, staring at data on the main screen, "we could build armor that heals itself, ships that repair mid-battle. This isn't just a weapon fragment. It's a new kind of science. Kabir, standing beside him, looked exhausted but hopeful. So we're not just trying to survive anymore. We're trying to catch up. We have to, Arian said. Because right now, we're centuries behind. While Arian's team studied the alien technology, another effort was underway across the globe. The largest military buildup in human history. Factories that once built cars now built defense systems. Shipyards that had constructed cargo vessels for decades were repurposed to build combat ships based on new designs, blending traditional engineering with fragments of alien technology. Soldiers from different countries who had once trained to fight against each other now trained side by side, preparing for a single, united purpose. At a military base outside London, Captain Elena Torres, a decorated officer from the Philippines, was placed in command of one of the first international combat units. Soldiers gathered from 15 different countries, all training together for the first time. We don't know what we're fighting, she told her unit on the first day of training. We don't know their weaknesses. We don't know their strategy. All we know is that they see us as nothing more than an anthill. She paused, looking over the diverse group of soldiers in front of her. So we're going to prove them wrong. The soldiers, exhausted from weeks of relentless training, straightened at her words. Fear was still there. Nobody could forget the images of the attack, the videos that had played endlessly on every screen in the world. But beneath that fear, something else was growing. Determination, unity, a refusal to simply wait and die. Not everyone believed the plan would work. Inside the Global Defense Council, tensions began to rise as the weeks passed. Some leaders argued that humanity's efforts were pointless, that no amount of preparation could match a civilization capable of building ships that crossed the stars. Others believed that provoking the aliens further by preparing weapons would only guarantee a faster, more brutal return. One voice, in particular, grew louder than the rest. Senator Richard Voss, a powerful political figure from a Western nation, began publicly questioning the Council's approach. In interviews and public statements, he argued that humanity's efforts to build weapons were reckless, and that instead, the world should seek to communicate peacefully, to show the aliens that humanity meant no threat. We are provoking an enemy we don't understand, Voss said during one widely broadcast interview. By building weapons, by preparing for war, we are guaranteeing our own destruction. We should be building bridges, not bombs. His words spread quickly, dividing public opinion. Protests broke out in several major cities, with crowds demanding the council halt its military preparations. Other crowds equally large demanded the opposite: faster weapons, stronger defenses, immediate action. Arian, watching the news from his lab late one night, felt a chill run through him. Humanity had united faster than he ever imagined possible. But cracks were already beginning to show. "Do you think he's right?" Kabir asked quietly, watching the same broadcast. "Voss, I mean. What if fighting back is the wrong choice?" Arian thought for a long moment before answering. "The message said we weren't worthy of contact. It said we needed to remember what we destroyed. That doesn't sound like a civilization looking for peace talks, Kabir. That sounds like a warning." "But what if we're wrong?" Arian looked at the sealed container across the room, holding the alien fragment that had already taught them so much, yet still hid so many secrets. "Then we'll find out," he said. "But I'd rather be ready and wrong than unprepared and right." And 5 weeks after the attack, Arian's team achieved their first breakthrough. Using data extracted from the alien fragment, combined with quantum computing power from 3 different countries, the team successfully created a small prototype, a thin panel of synthetic material capable of absorbing and redirecting energy, much like the alien ships had done during the attack. It was not perfect. It was not powerful enough to stop a direct hit from the weapons used in the attack, but it was proof that humanity could learn, adapt, and build something new from what little they had recovered. "This is it," Arian told the Global Defense Council during an emergency briefing, holding up the prototype panel. "This is the beginning of real defense technology. If we scale this up, apply it to our ships, our buildings, even our soldiers' armor, we can survive impacts that would have been fatal before." General Webb studied the panel carefully. "How long to scale this to full production?" Arian hesitated. Weeks at best. We're still working faster than anyone thought possible, but... He was cut off by an alarm blaring through the room. Every screen in the chamber flickered, then switched to a single image, the object beyond the moon. It was moving. Not turning this time. Not simply watching. It was growing closer. Within hours, satellites confirmed what everyone feared. The massive object beyond the moon had begun accelerating toward Earth, moving faster than any calculation had predicted. And it was not alone. New objects appeared on radar, dozens of them, then hundreds, spreading out around the original massive shape like smaller ships surrounding a larger one. This was not a single scout, observing from a distance. This was a fleet. Larger than the one that had attacked before. Far larger. Panic spread through the council chamber. Voices rose over each other, demanding answers, demanding action, demanding explanations that nobody could give. General Webb's voice cut through the chaos, steady despite the fear in his eyes. Time until arrival? A young officer, staring at rapidly updating data on her screen, looked up with a face pale as paper. Based on their current speed, 41 hours. The room went silent. 41 hours. Less than 2 days. Arian felt his heart drop into his stomach. Weeks of preparation, of shared research, of desperate progress. And it might not be enough. The prototype panel in his hand suddenly felt impossibly small, impossibly fragile against what was coming. They're not testing us anymore, Webb said quietly, staring at the screen showing the approaching fleet. This is the real attack. Arian looked around the room, at the faces of leaders from every corner of the world, all sharing the same expression of fear he felt inside himself. 6 weeks ago, humanity had been fractured, divided by borders and old conflicts. Now, faced with an enemy fleet far greater than before, they were forced to become something they had never truly been. One species. Standing together, or falling together. How many defense systems are ready? Webb asked, turning to the room. Less than a third of what we planned, came the grim reply from a Russian general near the front. Then we use everything we have, Webb said firmly. Every soldier, every ship, every piece of technology this planet has ever built. He turned to Arian, his expression hard but resolute. Dr. Malhotra, can that panel of yours be mass-produced in 41 hours? Arian looked down at the small prototype in his hands, humanity's first true step toward matching an alien civilization's power, still incomplete, still untested in real battle. He thought of the child's shoe he had seen in the ruins of Delhi. He thought of the 10 million lives lost in 23 minutes. He thought of everything humanity had built in the short weeks since that horrible day. The unity, the sacrifice, the desperate hope that they could still survive. We don't have a choice, Arian said finally, his voice steady despite the fear inside him. We'll find a way. Outside, beyond the walls of the underground chamber, beyond the clouds and the sky, the alien fleet continued its approach. Silent, massive, unstoppable. Earth had less than 2 days left to prepare, and nobody in that room knew if 2 days would be enough. 41 hours felt like nothing. Across the planet, humanity moved faster than it had ever moved before. Factories ran without stopping, machines glowing red-hot as workers pushed exhausted bodies past their limits. Soldiers boarded ships and took positions in cities, deserts, and oceans. Scientists like Arian Malhotra barely slept, pouring every ounce of energy into finishing what they had started weeks earlier. The prototype panel, the thin material that could absorb and redirect energy, was rushed into mass production. Factories in Germany, India, and South Korea worked together, sharing blueprints instantly through secure networks. Within 18 hours, the first shipments of reinforced armor began arriving at military bases around the world. It was not enough. Everyone knew it was not enough. But it was something. Arian stood in the command center outside New Delhi, watching soldiers load crates of new armor onto trucks. His hands were raw from work, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, but he could not stop. Every minute mattered now. Sir, Kabir said, running up beside him, holding a tablet. The fleet has entered Earth's outer defense range. Satellites have a clear count now. Aryan turned. How many ships? Kabir hesitated, his face pale. 312. Aryan's stomach twisted. The first attack, the one that had killed 10 million people in 23 minutes, had been carried out by fewer than 50 ships. 312 ships meant something far worse was coming. Get this data to the Council immediately, Aryan said. They need to know now. At the Global Defense Council chamber, the mood was tense, almost silent, as General Webb addressed military leaders through screens connected from every continent. The fleet will reach Earth's orbit in approximately 6 hours, Webb said, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was saying. We are activating full global defense protocol. Every nation, every unit, every available soldier moves into position now. Captain Elena Torres, standing in a command tent at a base outside London, listened carefully as the orders came through. Around her, soldiers from 15 different countries checked their new armor, tested their weapons, and prepared for a battle none of them had trained their entire lives to fight. This is it, she told her unit, her voice calm but firm. Everything we've trained for, everything we've built together over these past weeks, it comes down to today. A young soldier named Diego, barely 20 years old, looked up at her with fear clear in his eyes. Captain, do you think we can win? Elena paused. She had asked herself the same question many times over the past weeks, staring at ceilings during sleepless nights, wondering if humanity's efforts would matter against an enemy so far beyond them. I don't know, she said honestly, but I know we won't win by giving up before we even try. 6 hours passed in a blur of preparation, fear, and quiet determination. Then, exactly as predicted, the sky changed again. Dark shapes appeared above the horizon, spreading across the sky in every direction. Unlike the first attack, this time humanity was not caught by surprise. Alarms sounded in every city. Civilians moved into shelters built in the weeks since the first attack. Soldiers took their positions. Ships, newly built, reinforced with alien-inspired technology, rose into the sky to meet the incoming fleet. Aryan watched from the command center, his heart pounding as satellite feeds showed the massive alien fleet entering Earth's atmosphere. 312 ships, black and silent, descending like a swarm of predators toward a planet that refused to simply lie down and die. All units hold position, Webb's voice came through every communication channel. Wait for my signal. The alien ships slowed as they entered the atmosphere, spreading out over major cities just as they had during the first attack. But this time, something was different. Humanity's ships rose to meet them, forming defensive lines around every major population center. Reinforced armor, built from the technology Aryan's team had developed, gleamed faintly under the fading sunlight. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Both sides simply stared at each other across the sky. Humanity's newly built defense force, and an alien armada capable of erasing millions of lives without hesitation. Then, the first shot was fired. The battle over New York City began with a beam of white light, cutting down from an alien ship toward a group of buildings below. But this time, the beam struck something new. A shield generated by reinforced technology, stationed on rooftops throughout the city. The light spread across the shield's surface instead of destroying everything beneath it, absorbed and redirected harmlessly into the ground. It was not a perfect defense. Cracks formed across the shield instantly, and everyone watching knew it would not hold forever. But for the first time since the war began, humanity had survived a direct hit. Cheers broke out among soldiers stationed nearby, quickly replaced by grim determination as more beams began to fall. Similar battles erupted across the globe. In London, Captain Elena Torres led her unit into the sky in newly built fighter craft, engaging alien ships in combat that human pilots had never imagined possible. The ships moved with impossible speed and precision, but human pilots, trained together over weeks of shared knowledge, fought back with tactics built from combined military experience. Formation Delta, Elena shouted into her comm as 3 alien ships closed in around her squadron. Draw them toward the ground defenses. Her pilots responded instantly, breaking formation and leading the alien ships toward positions where ground-based weapons, built using fragments of alien technology, waited in ambush. As the alien ships descended low, chasing the retreating human fighters, ground weapons opened fire, striking the ships from below. 2 alien ships exploded in bright flashes of light, the first confirmed kills of the war. We got them! Diego's voice came through the comm, filled with disbelief and excitement. Captain, we actually got them! But the celebration was short-lived. Explosions rocked the battlefield as more alien ships arrived, overwhelming the defenses that had worked only moments before. Not every battle went well. In Tokyo, the alien fleet targeted the city with overwhelming force, far more ships concentrated in one location than any other city faced. Despite reinforced shields and desperate resistance, the defenses began to fail within the first hour. Buildings collapsed. Fires spread uncontrollably. Casualties, though far lower than the first attack thanks to weeks of evacuation planning, still climbed into the thousands. Arian watched the reports coming in from Tokyo with growing horror. Despite everything humanity had built, despite the unity and sacrifice of the past weeks, they were still hopelessly outmatched in raw power. Sir, Kabir said quietly, standing beside him, his voice trembling. New Delhi's outer defenses are failing. The eastern shield generators are offline. Arian felt his blood run cold. How many ships are approaching our position? 12, Kabir replied. Maybe more incoming. Arian looked around the command center, at soldiers and scientists working desperately to hold their defenses together, fear evident on every face despite their training and determination. Evacuate non-essential personnel, Arian ordered. Kabir, get the research team to the underground shelter now. What about you? Kabir asked. I need to stay, Arian said. The fragment, the research. If we lose this data, we lose everything we've learned. Kabir hesitated, then nodded firmly. Then I'm staying too. The battle raged for hours, spreading across every continent, every ocean, every corner of the planet that had once known peace. Humanity fought with everything it had built in the desperate weeks since the first attack. Reinforced shields, adapted weapons, unified strategies born from nations that had once been enemies. But it was not enough. Slowly, painfully, humanity's defenses began to crumble under the weight of the alien fleet's superior technology. Cities that had held strong for hours began to fall. Ships that had fought bravely were destroyed one by one. The casualties, though lower than the first devastating attack, continued to climb with each passing hour. In London, Captain Elena Torres watched helplessly as 3 of her pilots were shot down within minutes of each other, their aircraft exploding in the sky before they even had a chance to eject. Diego, the young soldier who had celebrated their first victory just hours earlier, flew beside her, his voice shaking as he called out warnings of incoming fire. Captain, I'm hit. I'm losing control. Diego, eject now, Elena shouted, watching his aircraft spiral downward, smoke trailing behind it. There was no response, only static followed by silence. Elena felt something break inside her, a mixture of grief and rage that she pushed down deep, forcing herself to focus on the battle still raging around her. There would be time to grieve later, if there was a later. At the command center outside New Delhi, Arian received devastating news through trembling hands. The Eastern Shield generators, the very technology his team had worked so desperately to build, had failed completely. Alien ships were now within striking distance of the city's remaining defenses. Sir, we need to fall back, a soldier reported urgently. We can't hold this position much longer. Arian looked at the sealed container holding the alien fragment, the very thing that had given humanity its only chance at survival, sitting in the corner of the room. If they lost it now, if the research fell into enemy hands or was simply destroyed in the chaos of battle, everything they had built would be for nothing. Kabir, Arian said, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the fear gripping his chest. Take the fragment and the data core to the underground vault. Now, Kabir grabbed the container, his hand shaking as explosions echoed closer and closer to their position. What about the rest of the team? Everyone evacuates, Arian ordered. I'll hold the primary systems as long as I can, then follow. As the team scrambled to secure their most vital research and retreat to safety, Arian remained at his station, watching satellite feeds showing the alien fleet closing in on the city. The situation across the globe was growing more desperate by the hour. Despite weeks of unprecedented unity and preparation, humanity was losing. It was in this darkest moment, as alien ships closed in on the outskirts of New Delhi and defenses crumbled across the planet, that Arian noticed something strange in the data streaming across his screen. A pattern. The alien ships, despite their overwhelming power, were not attacking randomly. They followed precise formations, precise timing, movements that repeated with mathematical consistency. It was the same kind of pattern Arian had noticed in the message left behind after the first attack. Logical, structured, almost like a test being run again and again. Kabir, wait, Arian called out, stopping his assistant just before he reached the exit. Look at this. Kabir turned back, confusion evident on his exhausted face. Sir, we don't have time. They're not trying to destroy us completely, Arian said, his mind racing as he studied the data. Look at the targeting patterns. They're testing our defenses, our responses, our decision-making. This is still an evaluation. An evaluation that's killing thousands of people. Kabir said bitterly. Yes, Arian admitted, his voice heavy. But if this is still a test, then there might be a way to pass it. Not through greater force, but through something else. Before Kabir could respond, the ground shook violently as an explosion rocked the building above them, dust and debris falling from the ceiling. Alarms blared throughout the facility, signaling that alien ships had breached the outer perimeter of the base. We need to move now, a soldier shouted, grabbing Arian's arm and pulling him toward the exit. As they ran through the chaos of the collapsing command center, Arian's mind continued racing, piecing together fragments of an idea that felt both impossible and, somehow, like their only remaining hope. Hours later, as night fell over a planet scarred by battle, the true cost of the day became clear. Reports flooded into the underground shelters and remaining command centers from every continent. Casualties numbered in the tens of thousands. Cities that had stood for centuries lay in ruins. Soldiers who had trained together for weeks, forming bonds across nations and cultures, mourned comrades lost in battles that had tested humanity's very will to survive. Captain Elena Torres sat in a makeshift medical tent outside London, her uniform torn and stained, staring blankly at nothing as medics tended to a wound on her shoulder. Diego's aircraft had been found, but there had been no sign of him. She had lost more than half her unit in a single day of fighting. In New Delhi, Arian stood in the underground vault surrounded by the remains of his research team, watching final reports come in from around the world. The alien fleet had not been destroyed. Far from it. They had simply paused their assault as night fell, hovering silently above the ruined cities, watching, waiting, as they had done before the first attack weeks earlier. They're just going to wait, Kabir said quietly, standing beside him. And then attack again tomorrow, aren't they? Arian nodded grimly, his exhausted mind still turning over the pattern he had noticed just hours before. Unless we find a way to change what they're testing us for. What do you mean? Arian turned to Kabir, determination burning through his exhaustion despite everything humanity had lost that day. I think I know what the message meant. Remember what your world destroyed. I think I know what we need to do. But it's going to be the riskiest thing we've ever attempted. Outside the vault, deep beneath the ruins of a city that had fought so hard to survive, the alien fleet remained motionless above the planet, waiting silently for the sun to rise on what could be humanity's final day. Arian looked at the exhausted faces around him. Scientists, soldiers, survivors who had given everything they had and still faced almost certain defeat. There's no turning back now, he said quietly. Whatever happens next, we finish this tomorrow. Night over New Delhi was quiet, but it was not peaceful. Smoke still rose from broken buildings. Soldiers moved carefully through the streets, searching for survivors. Deep underground, in the vault that held the last of humanity's most important research, Aryan Malhotra sat surrounded by exhausted scientists, soldiers, and one small black fragment that had started everything. Kabir watched his friend pace back and forth, his mind clearly working through something urgent. "Sir, you said you know what the message meant," Kabir said. "Remember what your world destroyed. What did you figure out?" Aryan stopped pacing. He looked at the fragment sitting in its container, the strange material that had taught them so much, yet still felt like it was hiding something important. "Think about it, Kabir," Aryan said. "The aliens didn't attack randomly. They studied us first. They knew exactly where to strike, exactly how to test our defenses. A civilization capable of that. They didn't just discover us by accident. You think they've been watching us for a long time," Kabir said slowly. "I think," Aryan said, "they've been watching us since before recorded history. And I think, somewhere in our past, something happened between us and them. Something we forgot, but they never did." Kabir frowned. "That's impossible. We would have some record, some memory. Would we?" Aryan interrupted. "Think about ancient stories. Myths passed down for thousands of years in almost every culture on Earth. Stories of beings who came from the sky, beings who taught early humans, or judged them, or punished them. We call them gods, myths, legends. What if they were something else?" The room fell silent. It sounded impossible, almost like fiction. But nothing about the past 6 weeks had followed the rules of what people once believed was possible. "Even if you're right," General Webb said, speaking through a secure video link from a bunker in Washington, his face tired and lined with stress. "How does that help us survive tomorrow?" Aryan turned to face the screen. "Because the message wasn't a threat. I think it was an invitation. They're not just testing our weapons or our defenses. They're testing whether we remember, whether we understand what we lost. And I think the answer isn't more weapons. I think the answer is proving we understand." "Understand what?" Webb asked, frustration clear in his voice. "Dr. Malhotra, we don't have time for riddles. The fleet returns at sunrise." Aryan took a deep breath. "The fragment isn't just alien technology. I believe it's a key, a way to communicate directly with them, not through force, but through understanding. If I'm right, we don't need a bigger weapon tomorrow. We need to answer their test correctly." Webb stared at him through the screen, silent for a long moment. "And if you're wrong?" Aryan looked around the room at the exhausted, frightened faces of everyone who had fought so hard to survive. "Then we lose nothing we weren't already about to lose." Through the night, Aryan and his team worked feverishly, combining every piece of data they had gathered from the fragment, the message, and the pattern of the alien attacks. Kabir barely left his side, running calculations, testing theories, searching for a way to turn Aryan's idea into something real. By early morning, exhausted but driven by a desperate kind of hope, they had built something new. Not a weapon, but a device. A transmitter, constructed using the alien fragment as its core, designed to send a message back into space using the same mathematical patterns the aliens had used to communicate with humanity. "It's ready," Kabir said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "But sir, we don't actually know what it will say. We're translating human concepts into their mathematical language. There's no guarantee they'll even understand it, let alone accept it." Aryan looked at the device, small and fragile compared to the massive ships waiting silently in orbit above them. "It's the only chance we have, Kabir. We tried fighting them with force yesterday. Today, we try something different." As dawn approached, General Webb called an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Leaders from every nation, exhausted from a day of devastating battle, listened as Aryan explained his plan. "You want to send them a peace offering?" Senator Voss said skeptically, his earlier warnings about provoking the aliens seeming almost prophetic now. "After everything they've done to us?" "Not a peace offering," Aryan corrected. "An answer. Their message asked us to remember what our world destroyed. I believe this device can show them that we understand, that despite our flaws, despite our history of conflict, we're capable of growth, of unity, of remembering. And if this doesn't work? The president of Brazil asked. Arian glanced at General Webb, who nodded grimly. Then Captain Torres and the remaining defense forces will need every second we can buy them, Arian said. We're not abandoning our defenses. We're giving ourselves one more option before this becomes a battle of pure destruction. The council debated fiercely, voices rising in fear, doubt, and desperate hope. In the end, with the fleet expected to resume its attack within hours, they had little choice but to allow Arian's plan to proceed alongside the continued preparation of humanity's defenses. As the sun rose over a battered planet, the alien fleet began to move once again, ships descending towards cities still recovering from the previous day's assault. Captain Elena Torres, her shoulder bandaged but her resolve unshaken, led what remained of her unit back into the sky, prepared to continue the fight despite the devastating losses of the day before. Formation positions, she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear still lingering from yesterday's battle. We hold as long as we can. Below, across the ruined but resilient city of New Delhi, Arian stood at the center of the makeshift transmitter, Kabir beside him, as soldiers and scientists watched anxiously. Sir, Kabir said quietly, the fleet has reached firing range. If this doesn't work in the next few minutes, I know, Arian said, his hand steady despite the fear gripping his chest. Activate the transmitter. Kabir input the final commands, and the device hummed to life, the alien fragment at its core glowing faintly with an energy none of them fully understood. A signal, built from mathematical patterns representing unity, growth, sacrifice, and understanding, shot upward into the sky, invisible to the naked eye but detected instantly by sensors tracking the approaching alien fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. The alien ships continued their descent, weapons charging, ready to unleash the same devastating force that had killed millions just weeks before. Then, suddenly, they stopped. Every ship in the fleet spread across the planet in attack position, froze in place. The silence that followed was almost unbearable, humanity's fate hanging in the balance of a message